Hey, what's up everyone? Figured I'd do a little video on taking on and off the J2 crank support for a 2003, 2004 Cobra. It makes the belt a lot harder to change, so this might help some of you that are installing one for the first time, or just the quickest way that I've figured out to take it off to replace my belt. So drop a comment if there's an easier way, but this is the only way I could figure out how to do it. I did figure out why my car was throwing belts. I had a slight alignment issue. All that is fixed. It was more on my tensioner side than anything. So I think I have that all worked out. So hopefully this will be one of the last times I'll do it. So let's go ahead and show you what I did. All right, car is in the air. Went ahead and loosened the belt already off the tensioner. Really, so all you have to do is there's 6 hex bolts in here. These are number 5s. These are number 6s. And I believe these over here are also number 5. So I'm gonna loosen those. Loosen all 6 of these first. I went ahead and started taking them all out. And then I will go ahead and loosen these guys, and it should help me just pull this whole assembly off. A lot of times you gotta kind of give it a little bit of persuasion, but it's not too bad getting it off. So I'm gonna go ahead and take all those bolts loose and off, and we'll go from there. All right, perfect. So let's see here. Once all these are loose, all 4 of those, went ahead and loosened these just enough so that cap is kind of loose on each side. Kind of see it wiggling around there. There you go. That way these will slide right out. So obviously, I mean, it's on there. You can't just pull it off. So usually I have to take a little something in there and just kind of try to pry it from each side, and it usually shakes it loose. Obviously, if you take out the fan, that makes it a lot easier, so you have way more room in here to work with. I definitely recommend that. I really don't think you can do it with the fan in, but that only takes another 30 seconds to get out for the most part. It's hard to show you with one hand, but normally what I do is I take a ratchet and just kind of put it right here, and then I'll go ahead and hit this side right here. It creates a little leverage, and then basically just creates enough wiggle room that it kind of gets it from being seized on to come off. So as you can see here, I'm kind of just pushing on it. Enough of that on all 4 sides, we'll end up getting it off. Here is the old belt. Somehow it looks like someone took a bite out of it. And we got a new one ready to go. That's the size I end up using. I measured, especially using a 3625 pulley, along with this thump tensioner, a number 4 lower, and then my Nation's alternator. I basically just took a string, like a little parachute cord, and actually just routed it around exactly where I needed the belt, and kind of just marked it off and measured it, and I added a 1/4 of an inch to it, and that got me real close. The nice part about this Whipple tensioner is it adjusts, so I still have some room. I could move it over, so I could go with a smaller belt or a bigger belt if I wanted to, and I still have a little bit of room here. And the nice part about the J2 is that there is an adjustment here for this back pulley, so you can make pretty much any belt size work. So this might seem obvious, but I always kind of just leave the belt like this. I wrap it around my crank, come back around, and then before I get to the alternator pulley, kind of just shoot it all the way up. The reason I did that is because when this piece goes on, I hate to admit this, well, it's upside down right now, but when I install this piece, I've done it before where I put it on and I did not go inside of this part and this pulley, and I had to take the whole thing back off again when it was time to put the belt on. So just kind of helps me. Maybe this is the dumb thing that I do, but it might help you out. All right, kind of just slid it up there, and kind of just gotta kind of jiggle that back. It'll start to set in. Then what you have to do is take this plate It's easier said than done with one hand, but I kind of hold it, work these screws in just to start threading it so this plate kind of holds, and then I'll start torquing each one of those down. It's a different set pattern. You have to start at, I believe it's 28, go around. Then I'll show you. Go ahead and crank the car over a couple times manually just to make sure that everything lines up. Then go to 30, then I believe 32 foot-pounds. So kind of do that process, and if you do, make sure you take off your primary and make sure that one's loose. See what I was saying before? I have, for some reason, gone around this before, which was not good. So make sure that your belt is inside this one and outside of this top one so that you can come around this pulley and hit your alternator. If not, you will have to take it off. I've done that before and it is not fun, especially ever after you get everything torqued down. And I just caught something. I was not paying attention. This was on the outside of this. So obviously I gotta pull this off and make sure this one runs inside of these two. So sounds simple, but it's just one of those easy mistakes you can make. You have to pull the whole thing off and it just stinks. All right, so a little reverse order. We're around that one. We're around these two coming up. These are just hand tight, all four. Then I just did these all hand tight as well. Kind of see where it closed the gap right there. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do is step these down, and then I'll turn every single time, spin the crank just to make sure everything's centered and flows without any kind of All right, so everything's in there. I just did this hand tight, these hand tight as well. As you can see, it kind of bridged the gap in between that little plate. We are inside these 3 for the belt, so it looks like we're ready to go. What I'm gonna do is go ahead and step these up to the torque specs each time. In between each one, that's why these belts are off. I'm gonna go ahead and spin the crank over and just make sure that everything turns freely in there and nothing's getting bound up, and go from there. All right, first ones are at 28 foot-pounds, and then just kind of make sure everything spins freely, which it is. And then I'm gonna go ahead and set it to 30, spin it, 32, spin it, and then go ahead and finish and get these snug tight. Okay, so this part I know I'm doing wrong. These are supposed to be torqued down to, I believe, like 10 inch-pounds. I kind of just give it a good little inch-pounds is pretty much nothing, so I kind of just give it a very, very light turn, barely anything on there at all, just to kind of make sure everything is snug. I've never had one of these back out. I do check them every now and then, but they always seem pretty good, just like that. But if you want to do it correct, I believe it's 10 or 12 inch-pounds. All right, so it's been a while since I actually installed this kit, but this front plate goes on first, and then you go ahead and install these supporting rails that slides through. Since I've already installed it and everything lines up, basically all I'm doing now that I'm replacing is just going back through and tightening all these up. It's not very tight. I kind of just do everything just kind of snug and hand tight on this. But there is a good YouTube video on Justin's website for J2 that kind of shows you exactly how to do these when you're initially setting everything up. But when you're changing a belt, really all you have to do is remove these 4 screws. Well, just loosen these 4 screws. That way, this shaft will slide out easily. All right, once that's done, just make sure that you move your tensioner here and make sure you get this primary belt back on. This one's still loose. I'll do this one from the top and fire up. All right, belt is wrapped around. The last thing I do is just kind of go through and make sure that everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be. Nothing's kind of hanging off. Everything is in the right ridges on each side, and it's running exactly how it should. That one looks good. Really, the only thing left to do is put my fan back in, and she is ready to run.